So imagine for a second that you are like the most decorated Marine in American history.
Right.
You've survived the freezing, brutal combat of the Korean War. You've fought through jungles, taken beaches, and lived through things that would break almost anyone.
And the absolute definition of an unbreakable wall.
Exactly. You are an unbreakable wall. But then you take your little girl to the hospital to get her tonsils out, and as she cries in your arms, terrified of the anesthesia, you completely fall apart.
Wow.
Yeah. So today, we are asking a completely counterintuitive question. What if the actual secret to building an unbreakable mind isn't about, constructing a fortress at all?
Right. What if it's about leaving a gaping hole right over your heart?
Exactly. And that profound paradox is exactly why we want to welcome you to today's deep dive. We are exploring this absolute fascinating source document titled Day 104, The Palace and the Still Mind.
It's a brilliant text.
It really is. And we tailored this deep dive specifically for you, the listener. If you are someone trying to kind of cut through the relentless noise of modern life and figure out the actual practical mechanics of true mastery, consider this your map.
Because the sources here, they pull together insights from ancient Stoics, modern military heroes, movement scientists, and even strategic thinkers.
Yeah, and our goal is to connect the underlying mechanisms between all of them, right? We're going to look at how competitive golfers, Roman politicians, and visionary leaders all navigate chaos.
And the running theme is that the highest levels of achievement actually require you to remain radically, almost uncomfortably open.
Which sounds a bit crazy. I mean, we're so conditioned to believe that strength means thick walls, zero emotional leakage, absolute control.
Yeah, but history shows that this urge to wall yourself off is usually the very thing guaranteeing your defeat.
So let's jump straight into how this plays out in real life. The first insight comes from, of all places, the quiet fairways of competitive golf.
Right, the golf course.
Yeah, there's this known tradition in the sport where the more elite a player becomes, the more they attribute their performance entirely to the mental game.
Like almost 100%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this isn't just a nod to sports psychology. It's a massive claim about where mastery actually lives.
It completely reframes the definition of skill, really. I mean, mastery doesn't live in the mechanics of the swing or the titanium clubs or, the course conditions. It lives in the quality of attention you bring to the moment.
The external game is simply a mirror of your internal state.
Precisely.
But, how does that actually work mechanically? Like, why can't a pro just rely on muscle memory when they're stressed?
Because the mind and body aren't separate systems. When your internal state is chaotic, say you're worried about a water hazard or the leaderboard, that anxiety creates actual physical manifestations.
Your body physically reacts.
Right. Your cortisol spikes, your grip tightens by maybe a fraction of an inch, your forearms lose their fluidity, and you get these micro jitters in your fine motor control. So the club face opens simply because your mind was elsewhere. If your internal state is chaotic, your external performance will reflect that chaos, no matter how many thousands of hours you've practiced the physical motions.
That makes perfect sense. So the external results are just trailing indicators of what's happening in your head.
Exactly.
And that same principle applies to scenarios with, frankly, much higher stakes than a golf tournament.
Right.
2,000 years ago, the Roman philosopher Seneca wrote a letter to his father-in-law.
Right.
Now, his father-in-law had just lost his job. But this wasn't, middle management. This guy managed the granaries of Rome. He essentially controlled the empire's grain market.
Which is a position of unimaginable civic importance. I
Yeah.
mean, if you controlled the grain, you controlled whether the citizens of Rome were fed or whether they rioted.
It was the heartbeat of the empire.
Totally.
Then, just like that, political forces beyond his control revoked the position. You would naturally expect Seneca to write him an outraged letter, plotting a political comeback.
Yeah, rallying the troops.
Right. Instead, Seneca essentially congratulates him. He writes that this is an opportunity, telling him it is better to produce the balance sheet of your own life than that of the grain market.
It's such a powerful pivot. Seneca recognized that his father-in-law was facing an identity crisis, not just a career setback. The external post was gone, but the inner work remained.
The life worth living is the one you understand from the inside.
Exactly.
But bringing this to you and me today, if we swap out Rome's grain market for our modern obsessions, like refreshing our work metrics, agonizing over bank accounts, or staring at social media analytics.
Right. Our modern ledgers.
Yeah. Is Seneca implying that external achievements are totally worthless? Or is the problem just how we are measuring our net worth.
Yeah, well, the problem is the currency we're using to measure our lives. I mean, managing the grain market had massive value to society.
Right.
But if your entire sense of self is tied up in external ledgers, the quarterly earnings, the job title, the follower count, you make yourself incredibly fragile.
Because it can all disappear.
Exactly. Those things can be taken away in a single afternoon by a corporate restructuring or a shift in an algorithm. If you only measure your life by those external ledgers, you are totally bankrupt the moment the market shifts.
Man, that's heavy.
It is. Producing the balance sheet of your own life means cultivating an internal accounting system that no one can fire you from your values, your character, your resilience.
So if the inner life is what truly matters, your first instinct is probably to just retreat. Find a mountaintop, delete all your apps, isolate yourself so you can focus purely on that internal balance sheet.
Sure, the monk approach,
Yeah. But our strategic sources argue that retreating is the single most dangerous thing you can do.
which is a beautiful tension, right?
Yeah.
Understanding yourself from the inside is not permission to hide. Robert Greene, who writes a lot on the architecture of power and strategy, he provides a framework that permanently destroys the instinct to pull up the drawbridge.
The palace metaphor.
Right. He argues we need to view the world like the vast, interconnected Palace of Versailles.
Think about the layout of Versailles. It isn't a bunker. It is a massive, sprawling network of rooms, and every single room communicates with another.
Exactly. And Greene says that to survive and actually matter in this world, you have to be permeable. You have to float in and out of different circles, mix with all types of people, and constantly move through these interconnected spaces.
Right.
Greene points out that the fortress mentality is just an illusion of safety. When you build walls to protect yourself, you immediately cut yourself off from vital information.
You become a blind spot.
Worse than that, a fortress makes you conspicuous. It signals to the world that you are terrified and have something to hide. You literally turn yourself into a fixed target.
But how does isolation actually damage us, though, beyond just missing out on, some office gossip?
Well, Greene elevates this to a biological level. Power and influence are human creations, meaning they are exclusively generated through contact with other humans.
Right, we're social creatures.
Yeah. Fundamentally social. Isolating yourself isn't just a bad tactical move. It is a form of self-amputation. You are actively cutting off the very organ through which you gather feedback, adapt, and grow.
And Simon Sinek takes that strategic concept and adds a really strong moral imperative to it.
He does.
He argues, we don't just circulate through these rooms to hoard advantage or network for our own gain. We move through the palace because we must stand for living, breathing people. The human beings in those rooms are the whole point.
Yes.
So for you, the listener, this isn't just about going to fancy networking events. It's about not putting your noise-canceling headphones on the second you walk into the office.
Right.
It's about leaving your door open. It's allowing yourself to be interrupted by the intern. But let me push back on this a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Because in a world of 247 notifications and, frankly, some incredibly draining people, being permanently permeable sounds like a recipe for total burnout. I mean, doesn't a fortress at least give us a chance to recharge our batteries?
That distinction is where most people get tripped up. There is a massive difference between resting and hiding.
Okay, break that down.
You absolutely need quiet, unstructured time to recover. But the problem with the fortress is that it shifts from a temporary rest stop into a permanent posture toward reality.
Oh, I see.
When you build a thick wall to keep out the difficult people and the exhausting emails, that same wall keeps out the serendipity, the unexpected alliances, the crucial feedback.
The good stuff.
Right, the human connection that actually gives you energy. Sinek's why is the cure for that exhaustion.
How so?
If you are only roaming the halls of your office to get a promotion, it drains you. But if you are moving through the rooms because you are genuinely invested in the people you work with, that friction actually generates its own energy.
Okay, moving through the world, staying open to serendipity, leaving the headphones off. That makes perfect sense. But the source material introduces one specific room in this palace that tests our permeability more brutally than the boardroom or the battlefield ever could.
Yeah, it's the room where you keep the people you love the most.
Which brings us back to the story we opened with. Chesty Puller, the most decorated Marine in American history.
The ultimate hardened warrior.
Yes, a man who fought in the Banana Wars, landed at Incheon, led men through the unimaginably frozen, bloody combat of the Chosin Reservoir.
Just brutal, brutal conditions.
And the moment that breaks him, is taking his young daughter to the hospital for a routine tonsillectomy. He carries her into the operating room himself, trying to soothe her. But she is terrified.
Right.
She is screaming, fighting, clinging to his neck, refusing to let him go until the doctors finally sedate her.
And then Puller walks out to the waiting room, completely shattered, looks at his wife, Virginia, and says, "She will never forgive me, Virginia. This is worse than Peleus."
Worse than Palaio,
Yeah.
which was one of the most horrific battles of the Pacific theater.
Incredible.
Author Ryan Holiday uses this story to illustrate that deep love engages every single dimension of our being simultaneously.
Right. You can toughen yourself up for corporate negotiations. You can train your mind for combat. But there is absolutely nothing you can do to close the soft spot that the people you love have access to.
It's like spending your whole life forging this incredible, impenetrable suit of armor, only to realize that if you actually want to experience life, you have to leave a gaping hole right over your heart.
That's a great way to put it. Holiday makes a profound structural observation there. The capacity for deep pain and the capacity for deep love aren't two separate dials in your brain.
Right.
They are the exact same capacity. You cannot numb yourself to the terror of your child crying without also numbing yourself to the joy of them laughing.
Wow.
The person who is completely unmoved by life is also totally untouched by it.
So wait, the fact that Chesty Puller was undone by his daughter isn't a crack in his toughness.
No, it is the foundation of his toughness. The exact same trait that made him a legendary commander, his total presence, his deep devotion to his men, his absolute refusal to hide from reality is what made him utterly vulnerable to his daughter's pain.
So this is what Robert Greene's palace metaphor looks like at its most intense level.
Yes. It requires you to be genuinely affected by the people you encounter.
But absorbing that much emotion, staying that radically open in a chaotic world, I mean, that generates a dangerous amount of heat.
Oh, absolutely.
If you just walk around completely exposed all the time, you're going to vaporize under the stress. You need a structure to handle it.
Which introduces Anthony DeMello's brilliant, simple metaphor.
Right. Tell us about that.
A visitor asks a disciple, "Why do you need a master?" The disciple answers, "If water must be heated, it needs a vessel as an intermediary between the fire and itself."
Because heat can't pass directly from a fire to water without a container, where the water just scatters and boils away into nothing.
Exactly. And the source connects this to Dr. Ed Thomas, who is a physical movement scientist.
Okay.
Dr. Thomas teaches that you don't develop strong joints or physical resilience through random, chaotic exposure to heavy weights. If you just go out and try to lift a boulder every day, you'll destroy your spine.
Right, your plan.
You need progression, methodology, and sets. Not all heat is useful. You need a structured vessel.
So on a practical level for our listeners, because we don't all have a Zen master living next door to act as our vessel, we can't all hire a movement scientist.
Right, very true.
How do you and I actually build this mental vessel in our daily routines so we don't just boil over when, our boss yells at us or life throws a curveball?
Well, the document itself models the answer. It suggests that the daily practice of reading, putting your mind in conversation with thinkers like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Robert Greene, that is the vessel.
Really? Just reading.
Think about how that works mechanically. When you get a terrifying medical diagnosis or a cryptic Friday afternoon email from your boss, the heat of that anxiety feels totally overwhelming.
Oh, yeah, total panic mode.
Right. But if your mind is anchored in a daily habit of philosophical reflection, you have a historical container to put that immediate panic into. Reading slows down your reactivity, gives form to the fire.
Man, that is such a powerful tool. The routine of learning becomes the structural walls of the pot.
Exactly.
But once you have this container built, life is inevitably going to drop some heavy, negative realities right into it. And this is where our sources seem to aggressively collide on how we should handle reality.
We do have a fascinating clash here between Marcus Aurelius on one side and Simon Sinek on the other.
Okay, so Marcus Aurelius, who was the emperor of Rome, he spent his reign dealing with constant plagues, betrayals, and wars.
A lot of heavy reality.
Right. And his philosophy is grounded in active acceptance. When bad news arrives, he doesn't just tolerate it, he reframes it. He says, "Good. It was meant for you by nature, woven into the pattern from the beginning."
And the document pairs Aurelius with Joyce Meyer's definition of patience.
Which I loved.
Yeah, she points out that patience isn't just the passive ability to sit in a waiting room. Patience is how you act while you are waiting.
Engaged endurance.
Exactly. The event itself is fixed, but your interpretation of it is entirely up to you.
But then, the document pivots to Simon Sinek's advice for innovators. Cynic points out that reality constantly tells innovators that their ideas are impossible and crazy,
Right.
but the innovator has to trust that their dream is clearer than reality. And there's this anonymous quote added in that the pain and sacrifice of the path are not obstacles, they are the texture of the goal.
The texture of the goal, such a great
It
phrase.
is, but hold on, I'm trying to reconcile this because it feels like a massive contradiction to me.
How so?
Well, Aurelius is telling us to accept the pattern, to just let it be. But Cynic is literally telling us to reject reality and fight for a crazy dream that doesn't exist yet.
Right.
How can a listener simultaneously accept reality and reject it without completely losing their
It
mind?
looks completely contradictory on the surface, I agree, but the key to unlocking this paradox is understanding time horizons.
Time horizons. Okay.
Aurelius is giving us a blueprint for the present moment. He is talking about the outcome that has already arrived. If your startup fails today or you get laid off, denying that reality just burns up your cognitive bandwidth.
You waste all your energy fighting ghosts?
Exactly. Aurelius says, accept the facts of the present moment immediately so you keep your energy intact.
Accept the present so you don't bleed energy. Got it.
And cynic.
Cynic is focused entirely on the future. Cynic isn't telling you to pretend you didn't get laid off. He is asking you to trust your vision for what you can build next, regardless of what the crowd says is possible.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Both the Stoic emperor and the modern innovator are moving through Green's palace. Neither of them is hiding behind a wall. You accept this moment exactly as it is to preserve your strength, but you relentlessly pursue the future as it must become.
Accept this moment as it is, pursue the future as it must become. That is incredible.
It's a tough balance. It is. Because doing all of this, leaving your armor open for deep love, circulating through the stressful rooms of the palace, building structured mental vessels, and holding the present and future in tension, it creates a massive amount of internal motion.
A dizzying amount of motion, honestly. And for that motion to not just dissolve into chaotic anxiety, it requires a center of gravity.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the still point.
Yes.
The document brings in a spiritual affirmation that cuts right through all the military history and corporate strategy. It simply says, "My still mind reflects only peace and holiness."
And you know, the mechanism of stillness is deeply misunderstood.
How so?
Well, a still mind isn't a blank, disengaged mind. It isn't someone hiding in a fortress ignoring the world. The document notes that when we react blindly to our emotions, our perception becomes heavily biased.
Right.
A truly still mind is one that has moved through full engagement, felt the anxiety or the grief completely, and then returned to a baseline of clarity.
The document quotes Peter Haggerty here. Life is a journey, and if you fall in love with the journey, you will be in love forever.
It's beautiful.
And the source points out this isn't just a motivational poster. It is a practical mechanism for endurance. If you only fall in love with the destination, the promotion, the retirement account, the grain market job, you will be heartbroken by every single delay.
Yes.
But if you fall in love with the journey itself, every step, even the painful ones, is exactly what you came for.
Which brings us perfectly back to Seneca's balance sheet. How do you measure a well-lived life? The document summarizes this using leadership expert John Maxwell's framework.
Right, the three parts.
Success is knowing your purpose, growing to your maximum potential, and sowing seeds that benefit others. Discover what you are, build that potential as far as it can go, and then give it away to the people in the palace. That is the ultimate internal balance sheet.
When you look at the entire scope of this deep dive, the golf pro mastering their internal attention, the Stoic emperor accepting a plague, the legendary Marine crying in a hospital waiting room, the visionary innovator fighting for a dream.
They seem like they occupy entirely different worlds.
Totally different world, but they are all practicing the exact same discipline.
They are mastering the art of staying open, staying moving, and staying quiet inside, all simultaneously.
Yeah.
They aren't roaming the halls of the world just to survive or to fiercely protect their egos. They are moving through the fire to become the people their specific lives demanded them to be, through contact, through friction, and through intense vulnerability.
It is the only balance sheet that actually matters. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you, the listener, to look at your own life today. Think about your daily calendar and the literal physical spaces you occupy, your office, your digital habits, your morning routines.
Take a really close look.
Look closely at them. Are you actively designing them like the interconnected palace of Versailles, forcing yourself into chance encounters, radical openness, and continuous growth? Or, without even realizing it, have you secretly been building a fortress to keep the heat of the world out?
It's an important question.
Because as our sources remind us, the pain, the difficult people, and the setbacks aren't obstacles in the way of your goal. They are the texture of the goal itself. Remember, an easy arrival is no arrival at all. Keep the drawbridge down.